welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. As consumers, social media has become an indispensable part of our lives. The ability to be connected with others, whilst also having a platform to share our thoughts with others, has resulted in an explosion of the content online. Globally, and on average, we are spending nearly 2.5 hours per day on social networks and messaging services. While social media might not be disappearing from our lives anytime soon, the landscape has been changing. To share some insight into the world that is social media generally, along with some tips businesses can apply to better leverage social media, we are delighted to be speaking with Knolly Moses, the founder and CEO of Pan Media Limited, one of the leading full-service advertising agencies in Jamaica, with a particular focus on online and mobile marketing, public relations, web and mobile application development, and advertising. Knolly, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so let's jump right in. So, Knolly, about 5 to 7 years ago, social media began to take off among businesses as a cost-effective marketing tool. How important is or should social media be to businesses and organizations?
In today's advertising world and marketing world,
exactly.
It is extremely important, mostly because a lot of old media channels aren't reaching the audience, and it's certainly those channels aren't engaging the audience. So it's absolutely essential that businesses of all kinds pretty much use social media as best they can, because that's where often their audience is. I mean, there may be some businesses by the nature of what they do, that it's direct marketing works better and so on. But overall and generally, you need to advertise and promote and tell your story in social media so that people can know who you are and know what your service or product is.
Understood. And one of the things that, at least certainly I would have said in the introduction, is that social media, the whole landscape has changed and evolved over the years. Back in the day, one could have just probably put out a couple of posts and you would have gotten, reach and engagement. But today, that may not necessarily be the case. Why?
Well, video has changed the game. Video is just easy to use content, easy to consume content. It's more engaging. It grabs people's attention, and you can put up a 10-second video, sometimes even a 5-second video, because a lot of people are using shorter videos. It's video and stories, and they've come together. People want to hear more stories. They want behind-the-scenes stuff. They want to know where did the product come from. Because of that, you find just simply putting a text post just doesn't. It can't compete for the kind of attention that video does. So you have to use as much of the technology and as much of the tools of the various channels as possible, because it's the same thing, and as all marketing, you're competing with other people who have messages who may present it better than you. So you have to stay on top of the way things are being done today.
Okay, but it also leads me to the question about whether social media is still, when I say still, a cost-effective marketing tool, because there seemed to have been at least a thought that traditional marketing channels were quite expensive. If you wanted to put an ad on television or in a large circulation newspaper or magazine, it could run you thousands of dollars, almost regardless of the currency that you're thinking of.
Well, traditional advertising is still expensive. So very few of them have seen the wisdom of coming down in their prices, which I think is a mistake. The traditional media is still useful for some things. Like, for instance, here in Jamaica, to reach a large number of people very quickly in one shot with a commercial, if you use television, it will work because the news here at night on the main television station has the numbers. So there was still room for it. But social media is now taking the same money that you might have spent in traditional media, and the smart companies are just shifting their budgets. They don't necessarily have to spend more. They just take the budget that they would put into old media and putting it into social media. The nice thing about social media, of course, is it's easily measurable. Not that having a number of fans and so on and likes necessarily translates into conversions or sales, but that's up to you to use the tools to make sure that does happen. But you at least can reach those people.
Okay. Now, since you are a digital marketing and advertising agency, what are some of the misconceptions you think that people, and perhaps even more importantly, business and organizations have about social media?
Well, social media is just part of a much larger story. And that larger story is that everything has gone digital. So because of digital technology, social media was made possible. In the same way, websites were made possible, and podcasts are possible, and blogs are possible.
Yes,
that can reach everyone. So it's really about the world taking on just a digital apparatus, and within that digital apparatus, there are all kinds of doors you can open to use for various things.
And just going back to that whole question of, cost effectiveness, I guess when we compare it with traditional media, social media perhaps still remains a cost-effective means. But what is the impact of the trust by the platform owners towards perhaps seeking greater advertising revenues from businesses?
Well, the truth is that social media is already getting a lot of their revenue from businesses doing promotions and advertising. And if you look at any business today versus 3 years ago, I'm sure there's a huge change in what they're spending in social media and what they're spending overall digitally than 3 or 5 years ago. The nice thing too, again, about social media, as I said before, it's measurable. The analytics, it makes it very easy to determine whether something is working or it's not. And a lot of advertising you do on social media, you're only paying per click. So that if someone totally ignores your message, you don't pay for that pair of eyes.
But while that might happen in some instances, I know that for some of the platforms, they charge you, let's say, on, views, and it works out to be something about how long, whether somebody's scrolling through, how long their eyes hit the post or whatever. So it can seem a little bit...
social media getting smart about their revenues. Just a couple of years ago, you post something on Facebook, and the bulk of your following fans would see it.
Yes.
And then they got smart, and then they decided to restrict that to just a few. And for you to get more eyes, you have to pay for it.
Yes. So is organic reach dead now?
No, organic reach is not dead at all. I mean, we just sent out a report, a monthly social media report to a client, and we made them take note that their 3 top performing posts for the month, that not only did they get great engagement because they had boosted and advertised those posts, but that the organic numbers they got was also quite good, which we interpreted as meaning that you had produced good content, that content that was relatable, content that people needed, so that we could have not spent money and done well with those posts. Spending money just gave us gravy.
Right. So talk to me about content, because it seemed to be such a critical element in terms of...
Well, I'm much more comfortable talking about content since that's my background. I'm a technical person.
Right.
Content, a Cornell University professor just wrote, it's either a study or a book, saying that, what people do now with social media content is no different than we've always done, Said, people kept their baby books long ago and their wedding albums and so on, and they passed it around to the family. When people came, they showed them. Right. It's the same thing. It's just that you now have technology, that allows you to do that with more ease and to reach a wider audience. Right. The key thing with content is that people love, which is exactly why, as soon as Instagram came up with their stories, Facebook quickly followed, because people love stories. People like to read about people. I mean, we constantly have to caution institutions that you don't just push out institutional messages. Right. You tie them to people and their stories and what it means. So content will always have a place in media. Right. You can't have a good radio station unless they're either producing good music or good talk shows or good documentaries, in the case of television stations, or good television series. So content and the people with the best content, the people with the content that has the most resonance, the people with the most timely content, with the most relatable content, will get more of that audience.
Definitely. Talk to us about influencers. I mean, probably 3-4 years ago, we didn't see much about influencers. I mean, they would have been there. You saw them, let's say in print ads where you had celebrities advertising watches, endorsing, watches and perfumes and so on and so forth. But now you see it, especially I think on like Instagram and YouTube, where everybody wants to be an influencer. Well, what is the premise of the influencer, though?
Okay, the thing about influencers is that, yes, you're right. We always had influencers, but in the past, they invariably had some real claim to fame, either their celebrity status that came from them being an actor or being something. What happened is that some people understood social media well and found good and clever ways to build up followings. And it was just an easy next step then to start influencing those followings, because if they're seen as hip and smart and know what's going on, whatever they do when they wear a certain kind of watch, that's what people want. And when they go to a certain event, that's where people want to be, and so on. So it's baffling to me too, particularly since influencers, and you meet some of them and you can't explain it, but they have managed to garner large followings and that are loyal to them, and they get those people to do a lot of things, and so whatever they endorse helps that service, product, or what have you. So, for instance, we here at Pan Media, we have had to hire influencers. Again, like I said, I'm baffled by it somewhat, but they understood how to, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but they certainly understood how to get people to pay attention to them and how to leverage that attention.
Right. So there are two questions I have for you on that now, because are they still important? Because I wonder, in terms of the proliferation of influencers, everybody wants to be an influencer. Has the value of influencers diminished?
I don't think it's diminished at all. As a matter of fact, they're getting more and more value because they're getting larger and larger followings, and most important, and as more people are aware how they can use influencers as part of their toolkit in doing online marketing and social media marketing, their prices have gone up.
Right.
And as they've got more in demand, they're able to command more. What we do caution clients is that you must find the right influencer, that they should have the right kind of audience you're looking for.
Right.
Do they, they may have a large following, but is that the demographic that you want? And you also want to look at not simply the fact that they might endorse your product or service or institution or what have you, but that you want to see what are the messaging that they're doing to see if it can work well with the messages you want them to put out for your company or
right.
Because sometimes they might be able to help you sell your product, but when you look at other things they're saying, and other things they do, you might decide, no, you do not want that relationship.
Definitely. And the other question, I think it probably came out of the whole influencer craze. I know in some countries, they are now requiring that, especially for influencers, that they're very explicit when they're promoting products. It cannot necessarily just be that, oh, I have this fancy handbag from a company, and it's not clear that the influencer is being paid to promote the product.
And I think that is something, just in terms of the integrity of that and all. Yes. And I think that's being addressed as influencers become in a sense more formal and all of that. People want, because on social media, people really want transparency.
Right.
One of the things that they want is that they want to know what are a company's values, what are your business practices, what are your employment practices, how do you make your pricing decisions, what are your marketing practices, your financial performance, what kind of environmental footprint you have, are you using forced labor or what?
Yeah.
So because of all those things, influencers find that because all those things that the millennials in particular, they want.
Yes.
And they're just very conscious. So the influencers kind of have to fall in line with that too.
And as you said, the word with millennials, because, and just for our audience, the millennials tend to be those born around the mid 1990s to early 2000s as starting birth years. So the oldest of them probably is about in their mid 20s. But
some millennials, they are millennials now in their 30s.
Okay. All right, but I guess this cohort has really grown up with social media. And as the up-and-coming generation, they are one of the segments that businesses are keen to engage. But I gather that sometimes businesses find it difficult to engage the millennials, and maybe for some of the reasons that you just mentioned. But do you have any other thoughts or observations?
What I can say is this. I know that there's a company here in Jamaica called Blue Dot that did a survey last year of millennials. And I can tell you that they did a big presentation, and there were a lot of businesses, a lot of the ad agencies went and so on. And you heard a lot of oohs and ahs, in the audience as these figures were being presented, because no one had surveyed them. But the results of the survey just showed you that, this is a very specific group with their own tastes and their own likes, and you have to pay attention. So in the same way that the market survey companies in the past did the all media surveys and so on, and asked people all kinds of questions, it has to be done now with the millennials. It has to be done now in their relationship to social media, so people start to understand the market and understand how to pitch to them.
Yeah, because there may even just be a very specific cohort that they need to target, and not necessarily just focus on just a wide cross section of audiences. I'm thinking, but perhaps.
Well, I think what it is that companies can't just think about, well, this is my product, and there's a group, and that's. They have disposable income, they're the age bracket that might like this product, and so let me push and sell to them. What I think that came out of the Blue Dot study is that the companies had to be very aware of some of the millennials' likes and dislikes,
right,
and understand them, and so that they didn't clash. For instance, some of them they were really concerned about what social issues a company attaches itself to, what political issues. They wanted companies that when they made a mistake or something, they did something that the consumers didn't like, that they admitted their mistakes and quickly. So I think because we're in a world where everything is close together, because technology has brought us all close together. We now have to be much more concerned about people's emotional reactions and that sort of thing.
Okay. I know that certainly like in the Caribbean, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube are probably some of the more popular platforms. Twitter, I gather, in the region in particular, may not necessarily be as popular or probably popular among certain cohorts. But there are also new platforms that I guess emerge from time to time. One of those that I'm hearing a lot about is one called TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about?
Well, I can't say I have much to say about TikTok at this time. You just have to watch and wait because, I remember when Periscope came out, everybody was hot, and I remember cautioning a client, but not just yet. Because, I think for the year, there's probably been about a dozen new platforms that showed up.
Right.
You kind of have to give it time and see how much they will catch on. I mean, we could see Instagram did, and Instagram is growing, although still in terms of numbers, Facebook still has the biggest audience.
Yes.
But, and these are figures more for the US. In the US, it says that, that 73% of marketers believe the social media market is definitely effective for business, and they have to be there. Facebook has like more than 5 million advertisers.
Right.
That's advertisers. And I saw another figure that says 54% of social media users search products online, and 60% of those users learn about new products on Instagram.
Wow.
So the data, is becoming so critical, not just the analytics that allows you to track who is following you, who's visiting your webpage, and where they came from, and all of that, and other pertinent information along this day, which trigger the analytics. But I think the surveying and the understanding now who these new consumers are, and the consumers aren't new; they're just new in attitude. The attitudes are different than earlier generations.
Okay, so we're beginning to wind down now. So I think we've spoken quite a bit on a number of topics, and I think we're probably now at the point where we probably could just distill them into some very succinct points. So can you just give us a summary of some of the trends that you're seeing in social media?
I alluded right up front to the early one, which is that, video is just, its use is just increased exponentially. Stories, people want stories, and the idea of stories to where it disappears in 24 hours on both Facebook and Instagram. That's useful, but it's making everyone become a sort of mini producer, filmmaker type. So because when you look through Instagram, you see all kinds of interesting things people doing with their information. The simple things that work are people ask their questions, and they show you two things and say, which one do you think I should get? And so on. But it's little trick ways of engaging you. I think that, so video, you'll just see more and more use of it. On some of these social media platforms, a lot more people are forming groups and joining groups. And then it's special interest, and then you can promote and market to them. And that's definitely your audience. More companies are using chatbots. A chatbot is not a social media, but it falls under the same thing with technology, where people want to be engaged a different sort of way.
Yes.
I think I mentioned the analytics, which allows you to track and measure everything you're doing. And I think overall, companies are recognizing that the level of engagement with today's consumer requires much more. And by that much more, I mean is that they have to find all kinds of innovative ways. Long ago, you put out a good ad, and that did it. No more. So yes, you need a good ad, but you need good content. You need to tell them your backstory. You need to tell them more about the company, and you need to tell them more about the people, and not just what they're doing when they're working, but what are they doing in their spare time. And I think that companies are rising to the challenge, but it also means they need ad agencies more. They need marketing. They need larger marketing departments, because there's this insatiable appetite for good content that's engaging and that moves them emotionally.
Understood. So if I had a company and I wanted to begin to prepare what could be I'm wondering whether I should say social media marketing strategy or marketing strategy. What might be 3 pieces of advice you'd give me or a business?
Well, understand that social media marketing is still marketing. Digital marketing is still marketing.
Exactly.
So the fundamentals must still be put in place. What is my product? Who's my potential audience? What are the best ways to reach them? And again, years ago, there was a store that I used to go to. It had a commercial that said its tagline was, "An educated consumer is our best customer."
Right.
Well, today's consumer is really very well educated because they can get information in a second by just Googling something and finding out. So you can't fool them. So so your strategy has to be deeper engagement, figuring out the platforms where you'll find out, figuring out the methods.
Right.
How you design your content and what kind of content you design to get to them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Knolly.
You're welcome. Take care.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.